Mr. Jim Yost to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you and welcome to this historic meeting. They're all historic, but this historic meeting of the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. And we would like to make sure the agenda is approved by all members of the council. Are there any members of the council who wish to change the agenda? Well, you can still approve the agenda. Okay, looks like it's approved by default. Time for public comment. We welcome members of the public who are here with us today. You're invited to speak. We'd ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes and state, if you would like to, state your name and where you're from. Begin with, and these are in no particular order, but Reed Hafooch? Yeah. Hafook? Okay, come forward at the mic. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Reed Hafley. I am here on behalf of First 5 YOLO and the Yolo County Health Department to talk, as a number of us will, about community water fluoridation. I'm sure a number of you know that that has been kind of in the rumblings in the background for a long time, and due to the new developments of the water supply project, we think it's probably the right time to move forward with this. So there are a lot of us in support of it, and there are going to be people saying a number of different things, and I will speak to its cost effectiveness. I know that cost is something, especially now, given the economic downturn and upswing, that is important to everybody. And I will say that the CDC, among other renowned, respected health organizations, regard fluoridation as the single most cost-effective public health intervention out there. For every $1 invested in fluoride, $38 is saved in dental treatment. So it's one of the very few cost-saving public health interventions, along with vaccines and a lot of other things. And I think that on the horizon, as we look forward to things that we can do in Yolo County, this is one of the best ways that we can return on our investment in terms of the public's health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carol Pircello. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Carol Pircello, as you already announced, and I've been a resident in Woodland here for over 30 years. And I'm also the chair of the Yolo County Health Council Fluoridation Subcommittee. And I've been on the Health Council itself for over 9 years. And my background is over 30 years in public health. So first, I would like to commend the Water Agency for pursuing and continuing the struggle to get us clean, safe water. Everyone's looking forward to good tasting water, I think. And I do want to remind you that the Health Council Subcommittee has vocally supported the water project over the years, publicly at city council meetings, and kind of waiting for everything to get approved. And now that the rate structures and the project themselves have been approved in both cities, we do want to offer ourselves as a resource on water fluoridation. We have several practitioners and experts that are available to us and on the committee. So we really want to make you aware of that. And again, our previous speaker talked about the cost effectiveness. And we've heard that a projected cost for installation of equipment would be about $600,000, which, looking at the overall cost of the project, is 0.2%. It's very, very small to put that extra equipment in. And then looking at our households, we would like the agency also to look into what would be the projected cost of fluoridation. We have a figure of about $4.50 per year per household in West Sacramento, which is less than 40 cents a month for a lifetime of tooth protection for our citizens. So it's very, very inexpensive to protect our teeth and to protect us financially, because dental care is expensive, not only for the bill that you end up with, but lost work time, lost school time, and just any pain and discomfort that we may have all experienced. So thank you for this opportunity to address you.
Thank you. Rick Baker. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Rick Baker, and I'm a recently retired pediatrician living in Davis. I spent 37 years in pediatric clinical practice, 2 years in the Air Force, and 35 years with Kaiser Permanente, the last 15 of which I practiced in Davis. I'm currently serving as one of the Davis commissioners for the First 5 YOLO, and a member of the fluoride committee that Carol just mentioned, of the YOLO Health Council. And I wanted to thank Don Saylor, our supervisor, one of our supervisors, and the whole Board of Supervisors for proclaiming at their most recent Board of Supervisors meeting this year, 2013, as the Year of the Child. And that suggests that we should always ask the question, how are the children when planning or implementing any project or program? And in that spirit, I come to you before you today to ask, with regard to the Joint Water Project in Woodland Davis, how are the children? In particular, how are our children best served with regard to dental care in our communities, and what does that mean for the Joint Water Project? And you may have guessed that that means fluoride, because you've already heard about it. So with funding from First 5 YOLO and efforts by CommuniCare and others in this community, we have improved accessibility to dental service for those underserved children in our communities. But what does this mean for the Joint Water Project? Well, water fluoridation is now made possible by the decisions of our communities to have the Surface Water Project. And that gives us the opportunity to fluoridate our water and serve our underserved children better in their dental health. Now, dental disease or tooth decay remains the most common chronic disease in children. That's always a surprising comment, I think. Having dealt with children's health issues all my life, I wouldn't have thought early on that dental disease is the most chronic common condition in children. In the Yolo County alone, when you surveyed low-income children in this last year, 30% of low-income children in Woodland had obvious dental decay, and 26% of those children in Davis had obvious dental decay. So over the past 60 years, public water fluoridation has reduced tooth decay by about 25% over the lifetime of the individuals. Fluoride, of course, is available by prescription, and of course I used to prescribe fluoride when I was a practicing pediatrician. And I would hear from the parents of the children, forgot to get that fluoride prescription filled, or ooh, that was kind of expensive, or I can't remember to give it to my children every day. So instead of having to deal with that, public water fluoridation takes care of it for them. Some families, of course, without health care or access to health care can't afford the prescription or aren't able to obtain one. So I think this really is an issue along the social justice lines for our communities to provide water fluoridation and fluoride to children of all incomes and all families' needs.
Dr. Baker, I'm not trying to be impolite, but your time's up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Julie? I'll probably get this one wrong too. Is it Galello or Gallelo? Galello. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Galello, and I'm the Executive Director of First 5 YOLO Children and Families Commission. And Dr. Baker said a lot of what I was going to say already. We should have coordinated. But what I wanted to share with you is recently we got, every year, CommuniCare Health Center goes out to each of the school districts in the county, and through their Smile Savers program, they provide dental exams and fluoride varnish, and they keep statistics for us on what the outcomes of the teeth that they see, the children's teeth are. And City of West Sacramento fluoridated its water in 2009, and each year since that time we've seen a significant decrease in the presence of dental decay in their mouths. And so we just finished our statistics this year for 2011. There's a 10% decrease from 2009 when fluoridation was initiated, and First 5 YOLO strongly supports dental fluoridation and hopes that with the water project, the opportunity to do that in both communities. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Richard Kennedy. Welcome.
I'm Richard Kennedy, and I'm a dentist in Davis. I've been there over 30 years, and I've also volunteered for CommuniCare's Davis Clinic for over 20 years. Speaking to the decay problem, not just for kids, but for adults and seniors and on, I think this is a really great opportunity for the Joint Water Group to come together at individual cities and create a community water fluoridation that could save a lot of teeth and a lot of anguish. One of the things we see with kids, as Rick mentioned, it's a pretty devastating problem, and a few areas of decay affect kids. Sometimes it's so bad they have to go to the hospital and have general anesthesia to be able to be treated. So it's not a simple situation. And a lot of these kids have lifetime of dental problems with it. So it's an issue that we could do a lot on that angle of it. The other side of it is thinking about seniors. Our population is getting a lot older, and I know I'm getting older. And what I find too is a lot of the medications that people take dry their mouths out. A huge number of them do. And dry mouth is more susceptible to decay. And if we can and I see this with the seniors, if we can get in there and do something with the fluoridation, then we can help prevent some of those problems. I know my colleagues had said some excellent things before. One thing I would mention, fluoridation started in 1945 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There are now 204 million people fluoridated in the United States. We'd like to get 2 more communities put together. The one thing too, in terms of the aging population, we talked about social justice in that aspect. A lot of times, older folks lose some physical and mental skills to be able to take care of their teeth better. Once again, if we had this fluoridation, community water fluoridation going on, we would do a lot to be able to help them out. So I urge the city councils to go back, think seriously about this. If you need more information, we'll be glad to help educate you any way we can. And you can do a lot for your citizens' health by providing community water fluoridation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Connie Caldwell. Welcome.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I am Connie Caldwell, health officer for Yolo County and also a resident of Davis for more than 10 years now. And I wish to speak to you from a public health perspective about the importance of fluoridation of public water supplies. Fluoride in the drinking water has been known to prevent decay and cavities since about 1935. And as we heard from Dr. Kennedy, the dentist, it has been added to the public water supply in many communities around the country beginning in the 1940s. It has been well proven to be a safe addition to drinking water, and the levels that prevent dental decay and still maintain a wide margin of safety to prevent fluorosis of teeth are well understood. It is certainly possible, as Dr. Baker pointed out, to have your dentist apply a fluoride treatment or give fluoride tablets to your children. However, not everyone has dental insurance to afford dentist visits. Not everyone can afford fluoride supplements, and it's not the easiest thing to remember to give to your child every morning. Adding fluoride to the public drinking water is a matter of health equity and working to eliminate disparity. Everyone who is connected to a fluoridated city water supply can obtain adequate fluoride simply by consuming their usual tap water. Preventing dental decay can go a long way to improving the health of the public, since dental decay contributes to a variety of acute and chronic health problems, both in children and adults. As Dr. Kennedy pointed out, more than 200 million U.S. residents now live where there is fluoridated water. However, only about 16% of the population of California has access to fluoridated public water. As county health officer, I would encourage you to take this opportunity to contribute to public health by seeing that the community water supply is fluoridated as you move forward with the new water system. National Public Health Week is coming up the first week in April, and the theme this year is return on investment. Fluoridation of the water supply has a very high return on investment. It is very inexpensive and provides great returns in terms of quality of life, less lost work time, less lost school time, less expensive dental treatment, and less pain and suffering. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other members of the public that wish to make comment who didn't turn in a card? Seeing none, we want to thank you for that as we move forward with our agenda. Obviously, this isn't a public hearing on fluoridation. I do feel in the interest of full disclosure to this August board here, I should let you know that I did not arrange this, though I'm a dentist. I wasn't aware that they were coming until Mr. Saylor notified me a day ago. I do serve as vice chairman of the Council on Government Affairs for the California Dental Association, and it is our policy to fully support fluoridation, so I should make that disclosure to all of you. All right. Thank you. We have a consent agenda in front of us. We have anyone wishing to remove any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion for the consent calendar?
Move approval of consent.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to have to abstain on the 1A because I wasn't really here, but
Okay.
I'm in support of B and C.
Very good. I'm sure that goes ditto for Mr. Hilliard. He wasn't here for the minutes. I guess it's okay to approve the minutes, though, even if you're not here. We're just approving them. So thank you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we need that to have a quorum for the approval. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had 3 aye votes, and you want to be an aye or do you want to be an
I'll
abstain?
be an aye,
okay.
just with the background of.
All right.
I'll just take your word for it.
It is fine. So we have unanimous vote for the consent items. Mr. Deemer, would you like to give us an update?
Yes. Chairman Marble and board members, be happy to provide an update on the Davis Woodland Water Supply Project. It's been a while since I've been able to do that, so very pleased to have this opportunity this afternoon. Want to review recent activities and accomplishments, talk a little bit about the upcoming activities and milestones that we're focused on in the next 3 months, review again the project cost, our procurement schedule and process, and then finally the overall project schedule. Over the last 3 months, there's been a lot of activities focused in the program administration, program management area. Probably one of the more significant accomplishments was the approval of the amended JPA by the cities of Woodland and Davis city councils. The agency provided technical support for the project's cost-sharing discussions associated with that amended JPA negotiation. We continue to pursue SRF low-interest loan and grant funding opportunities. The SRF loans through the California Department of Public Health continues to be one of our more likely and optimistic opportunities. We have had continuing dialogue with the Health Department, our most recent meeting on March 13th. We've identified lost well capacity due to exceeding of maximum contaminant levels, specifically nitrate, hexavalent chrome, pending regulation, and consolidation incentive program as the 3 most promising categories to elevate our project to a funding status. The Consolidation Incentive Program is being developed by the Health Department and their SRF staff. Basically, what it would do is elevate projects who have an element of bringing in small separate systems into a larger system. We also submitted a Proposition 84 grant application as part of the Integrated Regional Water Management Planning effort. That application amount was for $2 million. On the environmental and permitting side, we continue to make very good progress. We obtained our Section 1600 streambed alteration permit from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We received our Section 401 water quality certification permit from the Regional Board. We are awaiting the federal equivalent of that permit, the Section 404 permit. We anticipate that sometime in April. Some very good news, the third bullet, we obtained concurrence from the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, regarding our Section 106 consultation. And what that means is that we're not going to have any special requirements put on our project with respect to preserving the existing intake structure. We'll be able to move ahead with the construction of the new facility and the removal of the old facility without any special requirements. In Woodland, we completed modeling for the aquifer storage and recovery injection permit. We continue to work with the Health Department on our permit for treating the water at the regional treatment plant, and specifically we have presented the aerosol study plan to the Health Department. They're currently reviewing that, and we anticipate that we'll start the actual sampling under that study in April. And then finally, the hydraulic modeling of the intake. The Central Valley Flood Protection Board is expected this month, approving the impacts of the river associated with the construction of our intake facility. Land and right-of-way acquisitions similarly has continued over the past 3 months. We did close on the Woodland Development Company easement. That was the small parcel next to our access road to the treatment plant on Road 24. Woodland's finished water pipeline easements are all now complete and in hand. And you see the remaining rights to be acquired listed here. The Heydrich, McGinnis, and Lillard easements have been renegotiated. Those are along the Davis treated water pipeline, and they had asked that we wait until Davis made a final decision regarding the vote on the project and moving forward. So we're going to reinitiate the negotiations with those parties. We have made a final offer to Sierra Northern Railroad Company, and we hope to have some meetings, hopefully productive meetings, over the next few weeks with respect to those land acquisitions. And then finally, we have 3 parcels near the joint intake site and along the raw water pipeline where we've made final offers. So we're getting very close to having all of the necessary land acquisitions and right-of-way and easement acquisitions secured. In terms of planning, design, and construction?
Question.
Yes.
Yes, can I just ask, I was going to scroll down in the agenda. We've got two of the easements are coming before us today. I'm just trying to remember.
Those actually are not on this slide.
So we're considering those. I mean, those are in dispute because we're going forward with the formal procedures for eminent domain. So those really are remaining rights to be acquired too, right?
Technically, yes. That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Those were, the board may recall, in December.
You were just kind of
took action.
We can't even find the owners of them and stuff. Yeah.
So it's essentially a reconsideration of that same action that you took in December, but it's focused on the new owners of those parcels.
Right, and they're kind of not here because they're almost, I hate to say it this way, but almost in kind of an administrative, process to deal with them. Whereas these 3 are in, negotiation, final offer status.
That's correct. That's the distinction in terms of why what was formerly called the Turner properties are not on this list, is that because the board had taken an action on the resolution of necessity in December on those properties.
Okay. So I'm probably interested in, having a little bit of a sense of the timing of these last 3. And I mean, if the renegotiations and the final offers aren't successful, are we going to see them probably coming before us at the next meeting or in 6
No,
months? Or
I don't think, well, let me go through one at a time. I
Okay.
think with Heidrich, McGinnis, and Lillard, those, the discussions that we had prior to their asking us to wait until after the Davis vote were very productive. So we're confident that we can re-engage and continue those productive discussions. So we don't anticipate, at least at this time, bringing forward any action for the board. The last 3 parcels, the Oates parcels, there's a lot of parties involved, so it's more a question of getting all of the parties, together to agree on the price and the pieces of property that we need. So we don't anticipate any issues with that parcel at this time. The Sierra Northern Railroad, we have made a final offer. Those discussions that we've had to date, we're quite a ways apart in terms of what we believe the value of the property that we're acquiring is. So that could be coming back to the board as early as April, depending on how our conversations go between now and then.
Okay. Yeah, because I think I just encourage you, right, where we think we're headed to, impasse or a stall, for lack of any other term. I would just encourage those to kind of come to this board as soon as possible. And I think it's probably your plan, but we need to, consider what we need to do and then move on with it. I think I'm not seeing that you're suggesting anything otherwise, but I just want you to know that I'm very comfortable with that.
Very good, and we'll be sure to make sure the board is advised of any of those situations. And again, the only acquisition that's in that category right now is the railroad property. With respect to planning, design, and construction accomplishments, the joint intake facility, the 100% design is completed. The board did issue the RFP for the design, build, operate procurement at its December meeting. As we reported, also the regional water treatment facility site fill has been completed, and the settlement monitoring program is ongoing. We are working on intake agreements with RD 2035. This is agreements both as to how specifically the facility will be operated, the joint facility, as well as how costs will be shared as construction on both the intake project proceeds as well as our design, build, operate installation of pumps is advanced as well. And again, we continue to pursue the matching state grant funding for the joint intake. As the board is aware, we have secured an authorization of $16.7 million for the federal contribution to the intake project, and we're working very diligently on obtaining the same amount of money from the state.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of a timeline on that? Are you looking at?
Our hope is that we can have the funding identified and secured and identified in the upcoming state budget that would go into effect July 1st. So we have a series of meetings planned and assistance that we're procuring to ensure that we make that happen. Over the next 3 months, I'll focus now on what the primary focuses will be. We'll continue to pursue the state revolving fund low interest loan funding and other grant funding opportunities. We'll continue our efforts to optimize the overall project, minimize cost, and ensure efficiency. The development of the ASR program will continue with injection testing, modeling, the environmental impact report, and necessary water right amendments. One other activity that's important to get resolved in the coming months is the securing of the WAPA power for the intake facility. That's an opportunity for the agency to access very low-cost power to run the intake facility. So we're working with both the Western Area Power Administration, or WAPA, and PG&E to coordinate the receipt of that power at the intake, and also working with RD 2035, who currently holds the rights to the WAPA power, to make sure that the agency's access to a portion of that power is clearly defined and agreed upon. Next month, you'll be seeing the draft of
Dennis,
the
can I-
next fiscal year budget.
Can I interrupt you again? So the WAPA power acquisition effort is specific to the intake, or would be for the whole project?
Initially, just for the intake,
Uh-huh.
and that's because RD 2035 is already a WAPA customer.
All right.
We intend to apply for WAPA power for the regional water plant at some point as well, but our understanding is that's a 15 to 20-year process because there's not an existing customer.
Uh-huh.
And on the intake, because RD 2035 already is a customer, we hope to have that agreement in place and that power available when that facility goes into operation.
Great, but otherwise, the assumption is, at least for a period of years, we'll be a PG&E customer.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So next April, you'll see the draft of our FY14 agency budget. We're also working on an amendment to the UC Davis agreement consistent with the amended JPA, and I know that's important to Mr. England, and I believe a draft has been sent out of that agreement early today. So, yeah. So we wanted to have good news to report at this meeting. And then we're continuing to coordinate with the cities on the authorization to proceed with the design and construction of the project. And that will continue. Environmental.
You received that authorization from the City of Woodland effective Tuesday night.
Yes. Environmental and permitting. We need to obtain the biological opinions from the Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. Those biological opinions are necessary in order for us to obtain the Section 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. And the Army Corps of Engineer permit, as I've mentioned before, is one of the more significant and important permits that we have to obtain. We'll need an incidental take permit from Fish and Wildlife, formerly Fish and Game. And we hope to receive the initial results from our aerosol study in June. So the list
No
of
surprises.
and no surprises, yeah. And as you see, the list of outstanding permits the list is shrinking as we move forward, so we continue to make very good progress on obtaining all the necessary permits for the project. We'll also be working on completing the land and right-of-way acquisitions. We've talked about most of them on the previous slide. And importantly, we'll be issuing an RFP addendum to the DBO teams in April, and I'll get to that in a little more detail in just a minute. Just a quick reminder, this is a slide that you're very familiar with, a table that you're very familiar with. Capital costs for the entire project of $245 million. The construction cost shown on the left of $181 million. And this project cost has not changed since the last time we met. DBO procurement. We continue to meet with the remaining DBO teams that are in the process, as well as two teams that have dropped out of the process, specifically Montgomery, Kiewit, and also Balfour Beatty, along with CH2M Hill and CDM United. We're talking with them and exploring ways to maintain and or preferably enhance competition and interest in the project. They're exploring a number of different ways to do that. The plan is to take all of the information that we're receiving and all of the communication and ideas and fold them into an addendum to the RFP, and that is currently planned for our April 18th meeting. And we'll revise the current procurement documents in response to those comments received as appropriate. So April, you will see the actual recommended addendum for the procurement process. And then finally, project schedule milestones. Continue to make very good progress. Highlighted in orange are the activities that are tied to the critical path and the ultimate completion of the project in August of 2016. So we will need to get the approval of the project final engineering and construction by each city in March. And as Dr. Marble has indicated, Woodland took action on Tuesday night. We understand that Davis will be considering a similar approval next Tuesday night. The bond financing by each city is important. We understand that Woodland is on a little bit more aggressive schedule than what's shown here, looking at getting authorization for bond financing in the April-May timeframe, and Davis more toward the August timeframe, but both of those schedules sufficient to meet our overall project milestones. A award of the DBO contract in September will allow us to finish the project in August of 2016.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
looking at the schedule, Dennis, it appears that the award of the contracts to, well, the contract to one of the teams will be September 2013.
Yes.
So with that being the case, for the matter that the members of the public reported on today, that they commented on fluoridation, my sense is that including a decision from the cities at the time that that contract is awarded would be the most cost-effective approach if that was going to be the policy choice, because if it's not, then would it be a change order or some other kind of cost add at a later time?
Yes, I think the agency has reported that when we get asked about fluoridation, that's a decision that each of the two cities will be making. And certainly if each of the two cities requested or decided to add fluoridation to the project, the sooner we did that, the better. So in the next few months, 2, 3, 4 months would be ideal. That being said, if the decision took longer, it would not be a significant disruption or cost to add it at a later date.
It would just be more than doing it earlier.
Slightly more.
Okay.
I think as the speaker reported, the costs for the facilities themselves are on the order of $600,000. The procurement documents already require that the contractor leave space for those facilities to be added, so the footprint is there, so it would not be a major disruption to include the actual equipment in the contract.
The speaker also mentioned a very low, like $4 a year per ratepayer. Do you agree with that range or that magnitude?
I would have to do some research and talk to our team to find out what those costs would be.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest the board ask Mr. Deemer to do that if the two councils are going to be considering this topic, and I hope that they do. It would be helpful to have some good factual information for them to consider. So would it be, I would ask the board to simply ask Mr. Deemer to provide factual information to the best of his ability on the cost of installation and the cost of operation on an annual basis.
Any issue with that?
So if I could make
Yes,
a comment
please.
regarding that. For Davis, we've tasked our Water Advisory Committee to take a look at the fluoridation issue. So I think it would be quite helpful for Dennis to provide the information that Don is mentioning to them. And I also think that many of the people who spoke earlier, I think that would be, speaking to the Water Advisory Committee in Davis, would be very helpful to them. I don't know what Joe's thoughts are on that, but in Davis, that's sort of the path we've chosen to follow in terms of asking them to make a recommendation. And my sense is that we'll give a lot of weight to what the recommendation is. So I'd ask that perhaps Dennis can make himself available to provide some information to them. And then I don't have all the contact information of the people who spoke before us today. I have some, but it would be important for us to invite them to speak to that group.
Given the timing, Mr. Chairman and Brett, given the timing that the schedule shows, is it possible for the Water Advisory Committee actions and advice to come at a time that would support this prior to the September
So
award?
I'll speak for myself on that, and Joe can add in. I would be quite happy to set a deadline which minimizes the expense to the project. So if, Dennis, you suggest that we need to know this by July 1st, we can prioritize this item for the Water Advisory Committee and ask that they provide a recommendation in time for the council to make a decision, yes or no, by that date. So if you let us know what date you think would be the most appropriate to save the most money, we can ask them to move.
I think it'd be a relatively straightforward exercise. Very quickly, we could come up with the capital cost to add what the operational costs are and the decision of the timing. So we'd be happy to provide that.
So for instance, before leaving today, it would be helpful to find out a date. So if we were to if we were to make the decision by July 1st, would that be sufficient?
I think so, but I want to ask if Jim or other members here have other thoughts. Greg, you have a...
Yeah, I think it behooves us to remember that this is a very volatile conversation that needs to be held in each community, and before we add something to the RFP and the contract to install the equipment, I think that we would need to have that dialogue within the city, and I'm not sure that that dialogue could be completed by July. Each council is going to have to hear from their community and make a decision prior to July, and I'm not sure that this conversation can be had in that amount of time.
If it doesn't start, it doesn't finish.
Well, no, I agree with that. I'm just sitting there saying that if you're looking for a target date of July to tell the RFP, I'm not sure that we can give you the information of what it would cost to put it in, but the other side of it is whether or not the communities want it, and that's a conversation that also needs to be had.
My understanding of the design, when we discussed this, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so, was that the ability to fluoridate could take place after the treatment facility separately to each city based on a city decision, and I believe that's what was being incorporated into the design documents. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So that the effort to identify the capital costs, the operating costs, and the timing is relatively easy, as I mentioned. And we could also provide you with, if the decision, if the decision was to add it later, how much additional costs were there?
I didn't mean to interrupt because you were questioning, so.
No, I appreciate your question because it's helpful. I guess we just don't want to slow down the process and add unnecessary costs. So, if we're able to decide by July what the penalty is versus deciding, well, actually in reverse, if we somehow took until September, how much cost potentially are we adding versus if we're able to move more quickly and decide by July. So,
and I think it would be fairly easy for us to identify or provide an estimate of those costs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Herb.
Mr. Chair, I'm probably the one person in this room who's probably got the most experience serving fluoridated water to customers, having done it since 1986. I can tell you that the $4 per customer number is light. Sacramento County Water Agency most recently did estimates to serve fluoridated water to 55,000 customers, and it was more on the order of $20 per customer. The construction costs that were given by the lady of about $600,000 are about right, because the Sacramento County Water Agency at their Vineyard surface water treatment plant just put fluoridated facilities in for about $1 million, and that was a 50 million gallon per day facility. I think what Mr. Deemer has done, though, is with the placing of a staging area so that you can do it at a later date, it alleviates the need to make a decision right this very moment, or even actually before we start construction, because by having a placeholder area and being able to add it at any time during construction, that should not be an issue, or even if we were to add it post-construction. So I would indulge or if the JBA could indulge the staff so that we can do an adequate outreach to each individual city, and there may be the likelihood that one city may want it and the other city may not, so that we can thoroughly vet this with our communities. And I think we can do this probably before the end of the year and have that done, but I wouldn't be in any rush to do this right now.
Yeah, I don't know if this has gone to our Water Utility Advisory Committee yet or not. I would tend to doubt it. I can speak with some experience, having chaired a pro-fluoridation campaign in a city a number of years ago, not here, that rushing it doesn't do it. And number two, the controversy will increase as time goes on. So it does become a very highly charged and emotional issue. And I think that the question that Don brings up that really needs to be out there is the amount of cost savings, because we've designed it the way we have. How much cost savings would it really engender to do it now versus having a prolonged public process? And number two, which I'm sorry, I can't dig it out of my memory banks. I'm trying to remember. I think we discussed whether there would be cost savings to doing it right in the plant to both cities versus the way we've currently designed it, which gives each individual community the option or non-option of fluoridating.
Yeah, I don't recall those details either, but where we stand right now is to design the facilities to accommodate fluoridation by one or both cities. And just to final point is it's very, as I said, very easy to provide these numbers and the cost difference now versus later, and we'll be happy to do that. And my experience, as indicated by Mr. Niederberger and by Mr. Meyer, is that this does raise a lot of interest in the community, and that may or may not take time, but in any event, we'll provide you with the factual information, which is the easy part.
And I think it would also be appropriate to ask you and Herb and Greg to meet, to reach out to the individuals that have come today and meet with them and explore some of this together. You probably are, maybe you've already done that. I don't know.
I can tell you that, since I've been on board, I receive periodic calls from individuals and interest groups wanting to know the status of the fluoridation. I explained that we've made accommodation, and I have made a couple of presentations on the overall project to a couple of interested groups, and be happy to continue to do that if asked.
Bill, if I could. So a couple things. Brett's exactly right, and actually I have to confess my embarrassment that Tuesday night I learned that the City of Davis has referred this to its Water Advisory Committee. I had not remembered that, but it was very clearly stated by staff that at some point we did that. So it's going to go to our Water Advisory Committee, and actually I was hoping to share that with the people in the room here and with the whole board that that's what's going to happen. So I think, Herb, you can be a liaison with Diana and make sure that they know that that's where it's going to come up, and hopefully get it on the agenda there as soon as possible to start the process going now that the project is approved. With regard to doing the cost estimates, I mean, if it's not in the amended RFP that goes out at the end of next month, it's not going to be part of the formal bid of the parties that respond. So it's either going to be something that we talk to the successful bidder about incorporating before we do the contract, or it's going to be something that we talk to the bidder about, 3 months or 6 months or something after. And maybe we've got a little bit more ability to get a good price out of them before we sign the final contract as opposed to after, but that's speculation, and I think we do want to be careful in both communities about rushing this to the point where we create more of a difficulty in working through the issue. But I do think we have a bit of a governance issue that we have to be very, very careful about, which is that this JPA should not be ahead of either community, Woodland or Davis. So Woodland has not made a decision on this, and Davis has not made a decision on this. And if we're directing our staff to do too much work on this, I think we just have to be careful. Now, directing our staff to put together cost estimates, maybe is okay. But if all of a sudden it feels like the JPA is kind of pushing the cities here as opposed to the cities making a decision and conveying that to the JPA, I think that's a problem. You know, I'd be more comfortable recognizing in this room that the staff of each city is going to work to put together cost estimates and share that with the constituents and the councils in each city, and work with Dennis Deemer to understand the physical constraints and the degree of setup here. So the JPA is not taking the lead in doing the cost estimates. The cities are doing that because it's a city decision that has to happen. But of course, Dennis is being a good collaborator with everybody. So I like the idea of the three of you getting together. You know, I appreciate too that Herb's got experience in this area and might have some contacts that can help, you know, bring the information to us. But it's that, you know, the JPA is going to cooperate with the city's efforts to put together the cost estimates, as opposed to we're going to take the lead on the cost estimates. I think that puts this JPA in a little bit more comfortable position, but keeps the issue moving forward like it should, if that's acceptable to my colleagues. And I don't know if we need a vote on that, or we can just recognize that. Yeah.
Don, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah,
Oh, wait.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree. I think taking it from staff to our water committee and doing a review there, and then bringing in recommendations to the council, I think it would be a good way to do it. And outside this power, I agree.
I am happy either way. My concern has been that there's been no path for fair consideration of the topic. That it's sort of like the perfect lobby. People are afraid to address the issue because there's going to be a controversy. So therefore, there's never a path to a decision. I think that whenever the two councils, the JPA, you know, a PTA or a quilting group wants to talk about this topic, that there will be numerous expert scientists, public health specialists, people who know what this is all about, will be present to assist. So whatever the process is, I'm delighted that it's beginning, and that reasonable people will take reasonable time to come to a decision in a way that will, I hope, benefit 120,000 people.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I think the cost estimate that you're talking about will be very beneficial to us, to assist us in going to our various advisory committees to put that forward. The other thing I wanted to remind the board is that fluoridation at the water plant only fluoridates the water coming from the plant, does not deal with the water coming from our ground system, and that will also have to be addressed as part of that. Thank you.
Yeah, doing a price estimate with WESAC is not anywhere near what mixing wells is going to bring about. You of all people know that, so.
Right, and I think I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think that exactly that point by Greg, I was going to touch on, which is that I think when we heard about this before, the idea was that, you know, we had to have probably separate systems for each community, both because we want each community to be making an autonomous decision, but also because what we put in for Davis may be different at different times of the year based upon the mixing that's going on down in Davis compared to what you guys might do based upon whether or not you're going to be putting it into ASR or whether you're going to be mixing it or not, or those kinds of things. So I think, you know, but you guys can sort that out.
Actually,
because you'll be driving the process.
You have a very good point. It may be precluded from your ASR wells. You may not be allowed to put fluoride in the groundwater.
I don't think you are.
So, yeah.
It'll sure to be measure J or H or K in both communities.
Or both.
All right. Thank you very much. One other thing I just wanted to mention, I know that Doug Baxter and I'm not sure if it's Dennis are giving a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce Water Committee in Woodland next week. But there were some questions that came up. I want to make sure you're prepared to deal with them in terms of getting the pipeline under the railroad and how that's all happening. And I know that's been covered, but I just want to forewarn you that that's been a question that's been circulating around.
Okay. Bill, I still had a topic on Dennis's report. Can we go back a slide? And so I let it go by, Dennis, just because I didn't know if we'd come back to it or not. Yeah, exactly. So, we're really at a crux time in the next month before the addendum to the RFP is approved by us on the 18th. I mean, once that addendum is approved, then we're really, off and running and flying forward and looking forward to the bids. The Woodland Council, if I understand correctly, when you took your action this past Tuesday night, you set a price cap in your documents on the construction costs for the project. Is that Paul or Bill or?
Yeah,
Paul?
I think to clarify, what we did is we essentially capped the City Council's authority to the JPA to proceed, assuming that the project continues to remain within the scope and cost estimates that we currently have.
Okay. So, and let's see, of the 245, I mean, our side of it is 113, 114. Your side, what?
Yeah, we were a little, honestly, we were not so much set on a given number, because I think the way the bids come in, or are anticipated to come in terms of an overall price to include the O&M, I think the general idea is, for lack of a better term, it's not necessarily a blank check to the JPA, but as long as the bids come in consistent with what the estimates are, but depending on how the bids are presented, we didn't want to nail it down to a number to 2 decimal places.
Okay. And I think that the Davis, what I'm expecting to see next Tuesday before the Davis Council is going to have some version of assuring the community that we're not authorizing, any construction costs above the 114 level. I mean, Herb, is that right?
Our resolution is the exact same as their resolution.
Okay.
So that we mirrored them.
Okay. So it may not set an exact
Right.
figure, but it's
That's
gonna reference these construction cost assumptions.
I think the language is really, I think you'll
like it.
You'll
Okay.
find the language acceptable, hopefully,
Okay.
anyway. I thought it was good.
So that's fantastic. So I mean, I think that's. I'm sorry, Dennis.
I was just going to say that the way that it was crafted was to accommodate both the operations and the capital without constraining efficiencies in either area. But when you combine those two, that it's at or below the rate increases that both communities have approved. So when you set your rate increases, the rate consultants took the operating costs and they built that in, and those operating costs came from the agency. So it's the combination of the capital costs and the operating costs that the agency's currently estimated that has to be maintained.
Okay. Well, Herb, we may have to really look hard at that in the Davis context, because we've gone to a much higher percentage of financing on our rates. So, we're our 5-year rates that we just approved, the rate increase in Davis is going to go beyond the 5 years. So it's not going to be quite. You can't pin anything to the rates.
I didn't mean to imply that it's tied to the rates. It's tied to the cost estimates for both operations and construction, the agency's current cost estimates.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I just want to encourage Dennis, as we go through this last month or less, to think about all of the competition enhancing elements of the bid process that can possibly be considered, because the level of competition that we're going to want is obviously as high as possible to make sure that we get the absolute best bids, and I guess I'll leave it at that. But I just want to challenge us to make sure, because once whatever we prove on the 18th going forward, that's going to be the bid process that's going to carry us forward. And I just want to make sure that we're thinking of all the possible ways of driving the cost down at that point. And I think that's
Mr.
probably
Chair?
good to say for now.
Yeah, and
Sorry, just one clarification, Dennis. I hope I got this right, but there was a second sort of contingency in the authorization, which is it assumes that we're successful in achieving the state matching funds for the intake structure, because absent that, there are additional costs that would accrue to the agency partners. So it's both securing the state financing that we need for the, or funding for the intake, as well as staying within our current budget. Both of
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also, just to make sure we all are understanding the DBO process, once the firm is selected, there was still a negotiation period with that firm that had to take place before the final contract was drawn up. And I believe that was a couple of months to deal with that. So it's not like a design bid build. But I completely agree with what Joe's saying. We're out to encourage every ounce of competition that we can.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Shanahan, are you taking item 3?
Yes, I am. Members of the board, this item involves staff proposal for resolutions of necessity for the properties owned by LMR LP and Elkhorn Land Company. This matter follows up on action the board took in December. At that time, the board authorized resolutions of necessity against property owned by Hugh Turner and Elkhorn Land Company. The subject property involves a stretch of the raw water pipeline easement where the pipeline traverses from the intake proceeding southwesterly to Road 22, and at one point it needs to cross property owned by, at the time, owned by Mr. Turner, and adjacent to the Turner property is an old abandoned county road that has reverted to Elkhorn Land Company. After the board's action in December, we proceeded to put together the paperwork to file in court for the eminent domain proceeding, and learned that effective December 31, Hugh Turner, the individual, transferred his property to LMR Limited Partnership. So we're back before you today and to update and revise the resolutions of necessity to reflect the fact that the subject property is now owned by a new entity, LMR LP. It appears to be an affiliated entity because the Secretary of State records show the agent for service of process being Hugh Turner. So it appears to be a connected property. So before you are two proposed new resolutions recommended to the board for your adoption for these two properties. Procedurally, I recommend the board proceed with them separately in essentially a 4-step process. Step 1 would be a public hearing on the LMR LP property, then consider the resolution for the LMR LP property. Third, hearing on the Elkhorn Land Company property, and for consideration of the resolution on the Elkhorn Land Company property. There's a staff report in the board packet that has much more information, as well as the resolutions of necessity, and I'll pause there and see if the board has any questions.
Any questions from members of the board? Go ahead.
Just sort of a more general question. Does the transfer of property from the individual to the limited partnership change any of the dynamics of the legal proceedings?
No, it's a, well, it changes the dynamic because the defendant in the action is going to be different. It will now be a limited partnership instead of an individual. But procedurally, it moves forward. Sometimes if there's a change in land ownership, perhaps there's a fresh window of opportunity to negotiate something, but this appears to be an affiliated entity because Hugh Turner's name shows up at the Secretary of State's records for the new limited partnership. So it's we just recommend that the board adopt the resolution so then we can file the action against the right limited partnership.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We need public comment on
Correct.
this item.
Open the public hearing, see if anybody's here to speak on the...
we'll open the public hearing to see if anybody wishes to speak on item number 3.
Concerning LMR Limited Partnership.
Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item 4.
Yes, Chairman.
We still have...
Do you need them each?
Right.
Okay.
We still now I propose you open a public hearing to consider the resolution for the Elkhorn Land Company.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing to consider the resolution for the Elkhorn Land Company. Any public comment? Close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Move approval of staff recommendation.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Now we're on to item 4, considering approval of MWH task order number 4.
Yes, that's the recommendation before you. This is amendment to the MWH contract. MWH is the designer of the joint intake facility. Recommendation is to approve task order number 4 in the amount of $41,000 for additional work associated with the obtaining of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board encroachment permit. Additional landscaping consultant and planning was needed, as well as a river hydraulic modeling element. And there was also additional work associated with the electrical design, specifically additional coordination, unanticipated coordination with PG&E and West Yost to design the power incoming to the joint intake facility. So the recommendation is to approve the amendment for $41,000. Also, as noted in the staff report, this 5%, this $41,000 amount will go toward the agency's commitment to pay 5% of the overall project cost for the intake facility.
Any questions from members of the board on this item?
I'm happy to move approval.
Okay. Been moved and seconded that we approve the MWH America's task order number 4. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. And we're on to item 5. Dennis, do you want to make any comments about this?
Actually, I was going to ask Dick to introduce that.
Yes, concerning item 5, briefly, it's not an action item, but it's an important item relating to the agency, just to have it in the record of proceedings. As you're well aware from your city council hats, each city council has approved an amended and restated joint powers agreement. This agency is not a party to the contract, so we don't need to take action on it. The contract itself is included in your agenda packet. And moving forward, these become the new essential governing rules that will affect the agency board and staff in terms of moving forward. We will begin immediately implementing and proceeding in accordance with the new agreement. And it's just on here for information and to see if any of the board members have questions.
Well, I think it was covered by each city council. So any questions from members of the board? Okay. You have a question, Greg?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I'd like to recognize the staff effort and the hours that went into negotiating this for each city, and how much we appreciate it from the point of view from the JPA, all the effort that went into this and the presentations to council and the council's response back. Thank you.
I think we would all echo that. Glad to have it. I wonder, Lenan, I know that this was part of our board packet electronically, but would you send a separate copy of this new JPA agreement by PDF file to each member of the board so we can just store it as a separate file?
Sure. I just received from Anna today the fully signed, executed,
I didn't want to make comment that only Joe's signature was on there, but
right. Yeah, I can do that.
That would be great. Thank you. Okay. Item 6, any questions from members of the board or on the long-range calendar?
I've got, I'm sorry, Dennis, you want to go?
I was just going to say this is for the board's information and input. We try to forecast what will be coming forward over the next several months, so if we've missed anything or you require additional information on any of the items, we'd appreciate the input.
Okay. I've got one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's been a little bit of back and forth, in a couple of different agenda items before this board, maybe over the last 6 months or so, that I've raised, which is to make sure we're thinking appropriately about the kind of energy conservation incentives that will be present as a result of the new water supply system, and in particular, kind of just the ways in which a few things might be structured within the contract that may or may not make a difference. I'd like to have a check-in on, and I mentioned this to our general manager. He's thought about it. A little bit of that is actually behind my earlier question, which is this going to be WAPA power or is this going to be PG&E power? And it looks like we're going to be kind of using both. And there's different incentive programs that are available under each one. There's depending on, quite frankly, the higher the price of the power, the more incentive there can be for conservation and cost control, and so on. Plays out in some different ways. So keeping in mind this April 18th is kind of once we put a cap on the final RFP with this last set of amendments, that's going to be it before things go forward. So I'd like to have a meeting and just make sure that we're looking at the relevant contract provisions that relate to energy use, make sure we're making the right decision. I'm happy to do that as the Davis board member. I've got some ideas or at least questions that I want to have answered. Dennis has agreed that it'd be good time to check in certainly now, but I wanted to, if that meeting can go forward, I guess I'd like my colleagues to know about it and bless it. But I also like to ask that somebody from the Woodland side participate. Because,
let me just chime in there. We have an energy committee on the council. I believe it is Skip and one other member. So he would be the...
Sustainability.
They've handled
Tom and I are on sustainability.
our carbon footprint, all of those issues. But I think Skip's on that committee, isn't he?
No, it's Tom and myself.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think it would be wise to have that committee intertwined. So it may be, Jim, that you could do that if you'll take that on.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to.
That'll tie that committee as well as the board action.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yeah, so we'll proceed to set that up, identify some time in the next couple of weeks where we can get the group together.
Good.
And I have one comment on the long-range calendar. September the 19th is not a doable date because it is the League of California Cities annual conference that exact day and Friday of that week. So we need to look at another date option.
Okay.
That's the annual conference for the league.
Okay. Well, that's important to know, and we will look for another...
And since that's award of contract, I mean, that's pretty crucial. So from my perspective, the week prior to that would be just fine. The Thursday prior to that. And the Thursday following would be fine. Anybody else? This is on the 19th. The league annual conference is on that date, so I have to be there since I serve on the board. So it's some of you may be there.
Suggest that when we bring back the addendum and the more detailed schedule, we find the date in September that works in accordance with that.
Perfect. Any other correspondence, technical advisory committee comments? Herb?
I have 3 things to report. On March 5th, the voters of the City of Davis did pass Measure I, which allows us to proceed with the project. On March 19th, we held the public hearing for water rates, and the City Council did declare that majority protest did not exist, and they passed the ordinance approving rates.
What were the number of protest votes?
About less than 2,000.
50% minus 1.
Okay. No. And then finally, on March 26th, next Tuesday, we will be conducting a financing workshop for our city council.
That's great. I think it's appropriate for this board to extend its congratulations to the city of Woodland on those happenings. It's great.
We accept your congratulations and your relief.
And your hard work. And you know, some of us joked here, I think, at one of these meetings a year ago that we would look back and take comfort in what had happened, that things would still move forward, and I think we've kept that optimism, and we're moving forward. It's great.
Bill?
Yes.
I want to report on the aerosol study. The team has been out putting the design and picking the locations of the equipment, and there's a lot of high energy and interest in this study, I think beyond just for our project. So we'll be reporting back as that goes forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
When do you anticipate?
We're hoping to start sampling in April.
Okay.
With preliminary results in the June-July timeframe.
Any board member comments? Sid?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we have on the long-range calendar to come back in May with revisions to the agreement with the university. No reason we probably couldn't have come back in April, but David Phillips and I both have a conflict that day and we'll miss the meeting, so we have it set for May. The other thing is that what we're also now is the dust has settled in Davis. We're working on a new briefing paper to take to our leadership to say, okay, here's where we are. It's been about 1.5 years since we've done that. Here are the implications of what's happened as the process has gone forward. Here's how the prices have evolved. And we've also recognized for quite a while that when the city of Davis starts to look at the details of its distribution system within the city, that there might be an opportunity for the university and the city to do some things that would save costs for both of us to get the water from the northern boundary. And we recognize that that's a current one-time opportunity. So we're going to be looking at that and revisiting those issues and see if how that affects our timing that's available to us in the contract versus what we might do on another schedule. So just want to let everybody know we're moving that forward and working on those documents right now.
You're part of our historical memory here, Sid. You've been involved in this since the water right application.
I was in the room in 1994 when Jim Egan let everybody know he'd filed the application on our behalf. So, yeah, I've kind of been around since the beginning.
Great.
So,
Thank you for that update.
Me and Jock, I think, are the two.
Yeah. Okay. Any other board member comments?
Bill, I was going to ask you to make a board member comment about Cap to Cap coming up and the JPA's role within the water team.
Yeah,
I wanted to know
Thank
what
you.
that was.
Skip and I have been attending the water team meetings. Dennis, I know, attended one or two. Dennis and staff have been involved in crafting our part of those documents for Cap to Cap, which this year Cap to Cap will not be advocating for individual projects. We've done that in our trip a month ago, but our project will be highlighted clearly on the attached spreadsheet to the issue papers that will be presented. And I think the approach on Cap to Cap, at least this year from the water team, was that they wanted to attack broader issues like WIFIA financing, like infrastructure, an infrastructure bank, and a WRDA bill. So I think, and there's some large issues regionally that they're regarding the Delta that they'll be highlighting as well. Skip Davies will be full-time on the Water Committee. I'm going to jostle my time between transportation. Since I'm chair this year, this transportation district is sending me, so I'll be spending half time with transportation issues, half time with water issues.
Okay. So we're not a position paper, but we are kind of
Yeah, there are no project position papers.
There are no project position papers, but the committee will be well aware of the project. Yeah.
Really, staff has done I think an outstanding job of drafting the spreadsheet component to that, which details our project, its benefits, and the asks.
Yeah.
So it's there, and invariably, as you may well be aware, in those cap-to-cap meetings, frequently individuals do have an opportunity to bring up their projects. So
right.
I'm confident that'll happen.
Good. So that transitions into my member comment, which is just that I wanted to thank Dennis and the whole team that put together the mid-February, early February lobbying trip for the intake funding, and that was a very, very busy 2 days. It's very clear that we've got our arms around both the members of Congress and the key staff in the Bureau of Reclamation, that through the CVPIA's intake funding on the Sacramento River, we're lined up for that $16 million, 8 of which is already appropriated, and the other 8 is authorized but not appropriated yet. So that was a very, very productive trip. And I just want to make sure that there's so many members of Congress that we saw during that trip, as individuals, not talking to their staff. The cap-to-cap delegations are going to be sitting in front of those same people, and I just want to make sure that it's not lost on those members.
I left a piece out, and I'm over 60, so that's allowed. But I actually emailed Roger Gwynn a day and a half ago, because that's when we received the listing of who the water team would be meeting with. And I emailed that list to him and asked him to prioritize it for those of us that can participate. Don Saylor's also let me know that if we need him somewhere, that he would be there.
Yeah.
So that we've asked Roger to kind of prioritize those in terms of our asking the team to make sure we're on those particular meetings.
Right. I think that's just key. We don't want regional leaders in there who don't know how live the intake funding issue is, because we don't want it to pretend, to come across in any way like, we're not synced up with the region. So I totally get it that the cap-to-cap doesn't want to focus on project-based stuff, but, we can expect that somebody's going to look at the team and say, now, what about this Woodland Davis intake funding thing? Do you guys know about that? And the answer just has to be someone's in the room to immediately jump up and say, absolutely.
I think the other thing I'll just mention, I was at the NACWA annual meeting 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I happened to sit next to the chairman of Meridian Farms, who was with us, you'll recall, on this last trip, and I had a wonderful conversation with him there. And I think Meridian and Natomas both fully realize the timing issues associated with our project. I think we may have talked about that briefly while we were back there, but they fully understand that and look to be supportive of the current positioning with the Bureau, though they would like their funds certainly to happen too. But they've got some big fish to fry in relation to their facilities and the fact that the Bureau's not paying for the portion that has to be altered to get the water to their furrows. And so until they can get that resolved, they're really not in a position to want to get their intake fully constructed. Okay. Hope that didn't bore everybody too much, but thank you for raising that issue. That's good. Anything else? Seeing none, do we need a motion to adjourn, or can we just adjourn? Okay. Meeting's adjourned.